Latest discoveries have overturned 150 years of scientific thinking when it comes to the way we see ourselves, our reality, and the whole universe. In a world that seems more volatile than ever, we need to be honest with ourselves and understand that the current model we live in is not sustainable and is no longer working for the people of this planet. This new information is not seen in traditional mainstream media, textbooks, or classrooms, and that is a huge problem. From undeniable and now irrefutable evidence of ancient civilizations with advanced technologies that we cannot replicate today, free and clean energy extracted from the quantum field that would put an end to the production of fossil fuels, and the incredible discoveries within the human DNA and embedded inner technologies in our bodies that can literally make us superhuman. We can now trace back our origins way further than we previously were made to believe. All of this changes the way we view culture, religion, beliefs, medicine, spirituality, and even immortality, creating a new timeline for humanity as an exciting and compelling story is emerging. In this video, we will discuss the fascinating work of Gregg Braden, a renowned scientist leading the way on the discoveries of the deep truth of our origins, hidden history, and the ultimate destiny and fate. The first thing we need to understand is that it's all about the true cycles of time. Scientists now recognise that we are living during a rare convergence of three massive, natural, rhythmical, and predictable cycles of change. Cycles of climate, economy, and human conflict. Climate cycles. The history of our planet can literally be read like a book, from the seafloor sediments and the ice cores that we can extract from Antarctica, Greenland, and Russia. Tremendous amounts of information can be extracted by scientists from each layer of ice that gets deposited every year. We have readings for more than 420,000 years showing what was happening in the Earth's atmosphere, volcanic activity, how strong the magnetic fields of the planet have been in the past, how high the sea levels were. And here's the important part. We can tell what the temperatures were as well. You can clearly see the natural cycles and rhythms of our beloved planet. There are times when the temperatures of the Earth have been warmer and times where they've been cooler. We should expect to see some global warming right now because that is what has happened in the past. The question is, how much warming is normal? How much warming should we really be seeing? The green line that you're seeing in the middle of this chart is the average temperature for the Earth over these 2,000 years. So it's obvious. Sometimes the temperatures are above normal and sometimes they're below normal. Here's why this is so interesting. If you look closely, where we are today, are we above normal? Absolutely. Are we warmer now than we have ever been? Absolutely not. If you go back into the years 1200 to 1300 CE, the temperatures were almost twice as warm as they are right now. And if you go back to the years 820 to 1040 of the Common Era, it's 3 times above where the anomaly is at right now. So the warming does happen. As we are in a warming cycle right now, but the warming is not the warmest it's ever been. It's the cooling that comes right after the warming that can sometimes be the problem. This is a very, very powerful graph and holds the benefit of looking at the information from Mother Earth herself. We're not seeing this interpreted through the eyes of a corporation or of a political or religious agenda. This is Earth revealing to us her true and fascinating story. I'm showing this because we're being told by mainstream media that it is the carbon dioxide in the greenhouse gases that is causing the temperatures of the Earth to rise. The data in this graph simply does not support that theory, and I want you to see precisely how this works. The red colour shows the average temperatures of the Earth, and the blue are the levels of greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide. If we're moving from 400,000 years towards the present, what you see is that red lines rise before the blue. That means the temperature rises first, then the greenhouse gases follow. It's not our imagination. This is from peer-reviewed science that was published in the very prestigious journal Nature, volume 329, back in the year 1987. I'll put a link in the description below. Peer-reviewed science that they knew as far back as 1987.
Here's an example of a core that goes back some 100 to 200,000 years. And the sediments within this show clear differences visually, which have been caused by differences in climate. Now you can see here a whiter carbonate ooze and here a red-brown clay. These carbonate oozes have been laid down during interglacial periods, warmer periods, and these red clays have been laid down during the glacial periods, cooler periods.
Now, I want to go back and take a closer look at this chart because it's telling us even something more profound if you look more closely. When the carbon dioxide levels do increase, the temperature actually drops. The stronger the carbon dioxide levels, the cooler the temperatures on Earth become. Now, why is that important? Because it is a fact that we have thrown tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. We have now created more of a carbon dioxide burden on the Earth's atmosphere than we have in the last 420,000 years that we can show the history for. We've never seen this much CO2 in the atmosphere. So if in the past higher levels of CO2 have created a cooling effect, it makes sense that we can now expect a greater degree of cooling because of the higher degrees of CO2. Now, why is that important? Well, a lot of that cooling happens north of the equator. The bulk of the Earth's landmass is north of the equator. The bulk of the world's population is north of the equator. And for most of our food, it's grown north of the equator. So when we see a change in climate, it drastically changes the conditions that allow us to grow the food and support the industries that we greatly depend on. I think it is important to be honest, truthful, and factual with ourselves. So if the carbon dioxide is not causing the changes in the climate as we have been led to believe, then what is? Now we are beginning to understand the parallels between science and what our most ancient and indigenous traditions have always told us across the globe. If you go to the Inuit elders in the Arctic regions and you ask them what is actually causing this change, they will tell you that Earth has changed her location in space. Well, there was an Australian astronomer, Milutin Milankovitch, who agreed with this. Before he died in 1958, Milankovitch had created a theory that is becoming more popular now as it is telling the story that matches the data of what we're actually seeing. Milankovitch recognized three big cycles, shifts in the location of Earth in space. The precession of the equinoxes, 26,000 year cycle. Eccentricity, 413,000 year cycle, and obliquity, 41,000 year cycles. You're going to see something absolutely astonishing. When any of these cycles reaches a peak, and we're talking about thousands of years here, look what happens. The Earth has a warming period. So all true scientific evidence points out that the global warming we are seeing today is completely normal. Our ancestors knew this, and that's how they were able to predict these cycles, like the Mayan calendar in 2012. We all heard about it. It wasn't about the end of the world. It was about the end of a cycle. That's us right now, and Mother Earth is doing her thing in a very precise and predictable way. What has always been done for nearly 500 million years, and it's doing it right now. So this is climate cycle, and as Gregg Braden says, we need to be honest, truthful and factual about the science our planet has written for us, without the eyes of global corporations with political or religious agendas. Cycles of economies. And when we talk about economies, it doesn't have to be about money. The economies are about people, about the way we work together and share the vital resources that we need: food, water, medicine. Economist Nikolai Kondratiev, early in the 20th century, was the first to recognise the rhythm of cycles as it plays out in global and local economies. Whether we're talking about the small scale of a family or the large scale of the community or a planet, it seems to be the same thing. He identified a 66-year economic cycle, and he broke this cycle into seasons. Our 66-year cycle that we're in right now began in 1949. That was what he called the spring of this economic cycle, and it lasted from 1949 until 1966. This was a time of inflation. It was a beginning of an inflationary cycle. And in inflation, as we all know, there are certain stocks, commodities and bonds that tend to do better or worse depending on where they are within this cycle. From 1966 until the year 1980, we were in the summer of this economic cycle. I'm sure some of you can remember the days when you could deposit a paycheck in the bank and get 16, 17, even 18% interest on your money because we were in an economic cycle of this inflation. It was called runaway inflation. That's something we might not see again for a while. So from 1980 until the year 2000, we went into the autumn economic cycle. And in this cycle, as the others, there are certain investments and tangible assets that seem to do better than others. In the year 2000, we went into the winter cycle. It's called disinflation or deflation, when the things that used to have value begin to lose their value. Property loses value, precious metals lose their value, and the same patterns apply. If you look at the bullet points inside the blue circle, you can clearly see that each season perfectly matches the economic conditions we experience in the world at that time, and it also matches what we're experiencing right now. According to Kondratiev, in 2015, we have entered into a new inflationary cycle once again. And I think we're seeing precisely this as the Federal Reserve is beginning to raise the interest rates to create the inflation. We are seeing this happening in our world. It's a very, very different way of thinking about money and about our economies. Like Gregg Braden says, this isn't right, wrong, good or bad. It's a period of time where things change and the way we think about things also change. If you don't know that and you see the economy making wild swings, you think something is wrong and something's broken, when actually we're in a very volatile time within this particular cycle. Ray Dalio has a fantastic video explaining the changes of power within these economic cycles. The final cycle is a mysterious one to people because it's the cycle of human conflict. What do we mean, a cycle of conflict? Doesn't it just happen whenever and wherever? Well, the answer is no. There is a rhythm. There are cycles of conditions that make us more vulnerable and make us more susceptible to conflict. It doesn't mean that the cycles drive war and conflict. It means that when we find ourselves in those cycles, that we are vulnerable and susceptible, and it's an opportunity for us to walk very softly to extend that olive branch of peace, or go the extra mile to create an agreement, find cooperation, whether it's with our friends, our families, our communities, or between nations. You're actually seeing the rhythm of some of these conflict cycles. The beginning and the end of the Korean War, the beginning and the end of World War I, World War II. All of these pegged right at the top and the bottom of those cycles of conflict. Well, what's interesting is where we are in those cycles right now. In the year 2014, we began an uptick towards greater human conflict. And that uptick peaks in the year 2020 approximately. Can you think of any human conflict that matches this data? Now that we understand the three major cycles we are going through right now, we have a greater opportunity for deeper communication to create peace in a time of vulnerability. What is it that could possibly be driving these cycles? Well, this is where it goes back to Mother Earth. I want you to see how deeply connected we are to our planet. A lot of research has been done now relating human conflict and social change to the sun and solar cycles. As far back as the 1700s until today, scientists had the data where they could see the ebb and the flow of solar cycles for the first time and looked at human achievement and human disasters at the same time. They said, what are people doing while these solar cycles are ebbing and while they're flowing? It's about innovation and creativity, new inventions, the automobile, and the way we are using electronics today. The idea of physics, Einstein, Niels Bohr, Max Planck, Nikola Tesla, this all happened linked to these cycles. So what you're seeing on your screen is a very rare image. It is the image showing the solar cycles in red, ebbing and flowing from 1750 until 1920. And the blue line above that is the human activity all combined, innovations and war. Big stuff happens when the solar cycles increase, and we seem to quieten down when the solar cycles decrease. Take a look at this so you can see precisely what is happening. In the peak of what is known as Solar Cycle 22, that was when we had the Iraq Kuwaiti War, a huge example of human conflict. Solar Cycle 23 was 9/11. Solar Cycle 24, the first week that the sun spots, that magnetic storm on the sun begins to increase. That was when we had what was called the Arab Spring in places like Egypt, Tunisia and Libya. Solar Cycle 25 perfectly coincides with the Russia-Ukraine conflict, as we are also seeing a massive increase in solar flare activity from our sun. All of these human conflicts are closely linked to the solar cycles. Humans are electromagnetic beings, so every change in the magnetic field around us or solar radiation will affect the electrical synapses in our brain, shifting our behaviours, thoughts and relationships to the environment. What we're seeing is that these natural conditions that create our environment, and we respond to them sometimes more aggressively and sometimes more willingly to cooperate. What do these cycles mean to us right now? If we understand how these cycles come together, what we know is that nature uses the extremes to trigger us for new ideas and new solutions so that the planet can keep on evolving. We are living in a time of extremes, so that's why we're seeing so many new ideas sprouting up to tackle the fragility of the capitalist world they have put us in. from technologies that are being hidden and consistently suppressed from history and the public eye, like zero-point energy that can literally end the burning of fossil fuels and produce clean and free energy for everyone around the globe. That not only will clean up our planet, but will reduce the majority of production costs for virtually everything: food, clothing, construction, transportation, etc., etc. From thriving families and communities who are taking back their own food production for a more sustainable way of living, gaining better food intake, preventative medicine, and having a more holistic view of the world. To decentralise forms of currency where the power is being transferred back to the people instead of the control of a world government with totalitarian agendas. The new discoveries in the quantum mechanics that are leading us to understand the new inner technologies, the power within our DNA in which we all possess, not only having the ability to heal ourselves through frequency and thought alone, but also to perform astro travel, remote viewing, telekinesis, telepathy, etc., and experience a totally new way of being human in different dimensions. All of this is now 100% backed up by peer-reviewed science. We are, in fact, living in a time of extremes. Our world is changing in ways we simply have not been prepared for. And I think it's safe to say, for most of us, those changes are happening faster than we have ever come to expect. And what that means is we've got to think and live differently, perhaps now more so than we ever done in the past. You now understand the extremes and what's causing them and what they mean to your life. In our next video, we'll discover how our time of extremes has already led to new ways of thinking and beautiful new solutions when it comes to solving the big problems of our world. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please consider subscribing and do share it with anyone who you think may benefit from today's information. Until the next one, bye bye.